The latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Ad Aspera per Aspera, is one of the best episodes of Star Trek that I have ever seen, with many people comparing it to The Next Generation's Measure of a Man. And if you know anything about Star Trek, you know that is high praise indeed. So today, I thought that it would be fun to go back and look at all of the major court-martial, court drama-esque episodes of Star Trek across the series and rank them all from the worst to the best. So without further ado, let's get started. And we're going to start off with an honorable mention, Voyager's episode Author. Now, I think this is a great episode. I love the discussion in the hallway between the EMH and Tom Paris. I love the cartoonish nature that the Voyager crew gets to act out, but also the issue that's at hand of, yes, the Doctor considers these people his friends, his colleagues, his family, but still he has had to struggle with things that they weren't fully aware of. I love B'Elanna asking, like, why is the mobile emitter a whole backpack when it really is this? It's the emotional weight of the carrying of it. And then, of course, the Doctor's rights to his artistic creation on the holodeck comes into question, but that's really only the last, quarter of the story. This isn't a full court episode, so it didn't feel right to include it on the list, which is why it's just an honorable mention. So starting off at the bottom of the list, number 11, The Next Generation, Matter of Perspective. Oof. While it's not an unbearable episode, it doesn't have much to offer either. I think the best part of the episode is the beginning scene with Data critiquing Picard's painting, which is quite amusing. And it sets up the themes for this episode, one subject matter viewed from several different points of view, quite thematically well, but I think the execution of this episode is pretty abysmal. We've spent enough time with Riker that we just know generally how he'll act in a situation, and nothing from the other two testimonies lines up even the slightest with what we know to be the truth about Riker. So there's never a moment where we think, yeah, Riker's just gonna rape this woman, or yeah, Riker's gonna threaten this man's life. It's just not gonna happen. And then the whole ordeal of the murder is wrapped up a bit too neatly and conveniently for my tastes. And then, of course, the matter of whether Riker actually raped the woman or not is not addressed. Now, we as the audience and the crew of the Enterprise, of course, should know that Riker did not. The aliens have no reason to believe that he did it, and that's still a pretty big crime, but they just up and leave the station. So yeah, unsatisfying episode, and not one that I enjoy. Coming in at number 10 from Deep Space Nine, Season 1, Dax. This episode has a great sci-fi question at the center of it. Does a Trill, which passes down the symbiote from one host to another throughout many different lifetimes, should they be held accountable for crimes they committed in a past life? It's a great question. I think it's addressed wonderfully from a whole bunch of different angles, but ultimately it's left without any legal precedent. It's another case of, oh, conveniently at the last minute, this new evidence shows that our main character couldn't possibly have done the action. So the case gets to be dismissed outright with no conclusion reached for the interesting ideas brought up on all sides. And also I find it annoying, though I understand her motivation, I still find it irritating to watch Dax absolutely refuse to help or talk with Sisko about the matter throughout the course of the whole episode. So that makes it a bit of a frustrating watch. Coming in at number 9 from the original series, Court Martial, a great idea with a pretty flimsy execution. This is the first time that Star Trek delves into courtroom drama, and I think they have an interesting premise for their first foray into it. Captain Kirk says that I did everything correctly, that ended up unfortunately resulting in the death of a crew member, but computer evidence shows that actually he panicked in the moment at best, or he purposefully did something wrong at worst, but nevertheless, he made a mistake, did not follow procedure correctly, and that is what resulted in the death of this crew member. computer evidence going completely against human memory and instinct and knowledge is a great idea, but God, do I find Kirk's lawyer in this episode unbearable to watch. He actively refuses to examine any witness brought to the stand, and I find that particularly frustrating in the case of Dr. McCoy, who is brought on as an expert in space psychology. He is forced by the prosecutor to say that hypothetically, if Kirk knows that this crew member doesn't like him, then hypothetically, Kirk might not like this crew member back, which is extremely circumstantial, just hypotheticals. And then the lawyer doesn't cross-reference Dr. McCoy, the ship's doctor, who would be an expert in stating the specific mental state of Captain Kirk. Other crew members state that it's not in Captain Kirk's nature to panic, but McCoy could explicitly say on trial for the stand that no, Kirk psychologically would never harbor hatred against this man, and he does not crack under pressure. I have done these evaluations. He is a psychologically stable man. He would never do any of these things, and that would be huge evidence for his case in the thing, even if it wasn't even if it doesn't get everything removed, it certainly puts reasonable doubt on the situation. But he just doesn't do that. In fact, he doesn't do anything until Spock solves the case for him. He's just willing to go, no, I'm not going to do anything. Damn, it's a shame that you're going to lose this case. Oh, Spock's coming in with new evidence? Let me not present this evidence to the stand. I'm not going to present it. Instead, I'm going to suddenly give an impassioned plea about how Kirk has the right to face his accuser, and his accuser is the computer, and he needs to go onto the Enterprise to face the accuser. That's an ineffable right. But his computer is not the accuser. His computer has the evidence. That's like someone going into a courtroom today and saying, the dust from the fingerprints is accusing this man, so he has the right to bring that dust onto the stand and confront his accuser. It's like, what? What are you talking about? So, yeah, while I enjoy parts of this episode, I like the drama in general, I think some of it is forced, and I find the lawyer exceedingly obnoxious. Coming in at number 8 from Deep Space Nine, we have Tribunal. What a fantastic directorial debut from Avery Brooks. This is an episode that I really enjoyed watching from start to finish. It gives this eerie, dystopian view of a trial in an authoritarian society as Miles O'Brien must continue to suffer and is put on trial for a crime he did not commit in the Cardassian legal system. And throughout the episode, there are incredible performances from the prosecutor, from the judge, from Odo, from Keiko, and of course from Miles O'Brien. I particularly enjoyed the part where Miles tells Keiko, don't come to my execution, don't give them the satisfaction. But the way we've been seeing the judge twist and turn everything in this trial into propaganda for the state of the people easily makes me go, it doesn't matter whether Keiko chooses to go to the trial or not, because the Cardassians will twist it regardless. If she does show up and she cries, then it's, oh, look what sadness you will bring upon your family if you commit crimes against the state. If she shows up and she doesn't cry, then it's, oh, look how heartless the Federation is when their agents fail in their plots against the Cardassian Union. And then if she doesn't choose to show up, then it's, she couldn't even stand to face seeing the result of her husband's horrible crimes. She disavowed him. His guilt made her not want to appear. It doesn't matter whether she goes or not. The Cardassians, this whole system is built so that way they can always twist propaganda into their favor, and I love that chilling view of their society. Some tech issues means that it's a different day, but we're back with number 7, Judgment from Enterprise Season 2. This episode really does the Klingons justice, pun kind of intended. When Archer is put on trial in front of the Klingon court system, we get a glimpse into Klingon society that is outside of the warrior caste, and the character of Kolos gives us a glimpse of a character who is part of Klingon society but is not a warrior, as he has accepted being forced into his role as a defense advocate for people judged enemies of the Empire, and he is essentially there to lose his cases. But through conversations with Archer, he regains his fighting spirit, his honor in the courtroom, and actually puts up a defense for Archer, which leads to some controversy in the courtroom, but he says that Klingon justice used to be about actual justice and honor, and being a warrior is not the only way to get honor and to be an honorable person. I really like this view into Klingon society. I really like the character journey that we go on through Kolos, and of course, the actor who's best known for playing General Martok in Deep Space Nine does a fantastic job here. Coming in at number 6 from the original series, we have the Menagerie, parts 1 and 2. While this wasn't the Star Trek's first foray into a court-martial, that being the episode Court-Martial that we talked about earlier, I think this might be the most iconic depiction of that. At least it's the one that I remember the most from watching the original series in my childhood. And we have a very interesting manner in which evidence is being presented as the Talosians from Talos 4 are telepathically transmitting exact images of how events happened many years before, back when Captain Pike was in command of the Enterprise. While this was a clever gimmick to reuse footage from the unaired original pilot of Star Trek in order to save production costs and time, I think that they did a good job building a story around these clips, as well as the first time viewing the question of why on Earth would Spock commit these crimes and go against Starfleet orders is a good mystery and a good plot hook. Now, I do think the episode weakens a little bit when you get to the end and it's like, okay, I understand everything and why Spock brought him back here and why they accepted. I like all of that. But why is going to Talos a death sentence in the Federation, and the only death sentence at that? I think it's really just to build drama. They don't explain that part of it. But otherwise, this is a really good episode, a great watch, even if some of the courtroom elements aren't as strong as some of the courtroom elements of the later episodes on this list. Coming in at number 5 from Voyager, we have Death Wish. While the near-omnipotent Q first appeared as a judge putting Jean-Luc Picard and all of humanity on trial in The Next Generation, I actually think this is the character's best outing in a courtroom setting. Seeing Q as a prosecutor acting in behalf of the Continuum, putting this other Q, Quinn, on trial for wanting to commit suicide, and what this leads to is a fantastic exploration on the morality of assisted suicide, of the whole Q society, and some great acting performances from Kate Mulgrew, from John Delancey, from Tim Russ, and from the actor playing Quinn. I think the 4 of them really got to shine in this script, and I think that you could tell they were all just having a blast getting to work on such a strong script. Coming in at number 4, what I think might be one of the most underrated episodes on this list is Deep Space Nine, Rules of Engagement. One of the hardest hurdles that any Star Trek episode putting a main character on trial has to get over is the fact that we as the audience simply don't believe that the stakes are really real. Did one of these main characters that we've been following for seasons and seasons actually commit a horrible, heinous crime? No, of course they didn't. Are they actually going to be found guilty with lasting repercussions? No. So we're just waiting to see how they get out of it. But in this episode, one, it has the benefit of being in Deep Space Nine, where there are some serialized and continued plot threads. There could realistically have been a scenario where Worf was framed, and then later we had an episode where they were breaking him out of Klingon prison. Obviously that didn't happen, but it's more believable in a Deep Space Nine setting compared to most other Star Trek shows. And then also, we have the benefit of the crime that's being asked about it's not a matter of did Worf do it. He gave the order. No one is denying that he gave the order to shoot this ship. The question is, what were his motives? Was he justified in this act in the heat of battle? And that's a much more compelling argument because it gets into the core of Worf of is he following his Starfleet principles or is he following his Klingon bloodlust? And I think both sides of the argument had great points to be made. And by the end, this episode gets to both have its cake and eat it too, because while it is a conspiracy that leaves the deaths that Worf is accused of causing being nullified, the fact is that by the end of the trial, had that evidence not been brought to light, Worf would have been found guilty. He absolutely would have erroneously fired on this civilian transport, and he gets a talking down by Sisko at the very end. But this episode gets to not have the lasting physical repercussions to Worf, like him being carted off to jail or taken off the show or anything like that. But he has moral growth and repercussions, and he has to live with the fact that he was so caught up in his own need to prove himself to the Klingons in battle that he would have destroyed a civilian transport ship filled with civilians and children. So I really dug this episode. The performances by Sisko really stand out. The scene with Sisko and Worf at the end is a great way to end this episode off on, talking about the responsibility of leadership, and you really get to see Worf grow as a character throughout this episode. Coming in at number 3 from The Next Generation, we have Drumhead. This is an iconic episode that I feel like doesn't need much explanation. We have a witch hunt trial of this admiral coming on board, coming out of retirement, and looking for a conspiracy anywhere she can find it. Even when the original crime is resolved and the supposed sabotage is proved to just be a mistake, the hunt continues and ends with Picard's ultimate speech, which is just a fantastic acting display from Patrick Stewart. And the guest star Gene Simmons also does a phenomenal job with her role as the power-hungry person cloaking their deeds in good intentions. I also really like the end conversation of this episode between Picard and Worf, talking about how he went along with this, and we have to remember the fine line between security and privacy. Also, the actor who plays Simon Tarsus does a fantastic job, because even though he only appears in this one episode, he's a character that I remember from the course of The Next Generation. This is a well-crafted, thoughtful episode, and its message still bears relevance today. It's one of the ones that I go back and rewatch frequently when I want to watch a good Next Generation episode, and for that, it comes in at number 3 on this list. Now, when it comes to places number 1 and 2, I think we all know what it's down between. Obviously, we've got the iconic Measure of a Man, which is the epitome of a Star Trek courtroom episode. It's what all other episodes aspire to be when they get in a Star Trek courtroom. It distills Star Trek philosophy in such a wonderful and thought-provoking way, while still making it relevant to modern day, which is what Star Trek does best. And then there's also the reason that I'm filming this video in the first place, Ad Astra per Aspera from Strange New Worlds, which is a phenomenal entry in acting tour de force from all of the characters involved, with phenomenal directing and writing. It feels both extremely relevant to today's time and also like a script that could have been made from the peak of the original series or The Next Generation. There's something so timeless and timely about it, and I find it very hard to choose which slot number 1 and 2 should go between these two episodes, because with The Measure of a Man, I mean, that's an iconic episode that I've loved since being a kid and watching through The Next Generation for the first time. It is the first truly great episode that The Next Generation made, and it still holds up to this day. And the performances from Patrick Stewart, from Brent Spiner, and from Jonathan Frakes are phenomenal, especially the fact that Riker is forced to act as the prosecutor against Data. The scene where he turns Data off is chilling, and I still get goosebumps watching it today, and then also Picard's end speech is so iconic. I can think of the next words as he's saying it because it's so ingrained into my head. But then also, this episode really truly lives up to the standard set by Measure of a Man. I think that Ad Astra per Aspera is a phenomenal episode, and it also gets out of the Star Trek trope, courtroom episode specific trope of having one of the main characters act as the defense for another main character. They get an actual civil rights attorney in here, and through that they get to talk about, one, the benefit of civil rights attorneys to begin with, the possible flaws baked into an civilization like the Federation that even aspires to be perfect, but blind spots they might have in terms of discrimination. And then we also get phenomenal speeches from all of the characters, and we get to tie it into ideas such as discrimination against trans people that we have today, whether they are passing or not. We also talk about don't say gay laws from the past and from today. It just feels so perfectly encapsulating of what it means to have laws that discriminate against people and how to attack and discuss those issues. So it's a really tough choice. I don't want to leave the episode by saying, oh, they tie for spots 1 and 2, because that feels anticlimactic for the end. But it really, really, truly is a hard choice, and I think which one I would pick could change any day. I filmed the first half of this episode the other day and then had some tech issues, and the answer that I picked then could have been different than the one I'm saying right now. I think right now, and it may be recency bias, both in terms of the episode having just come out and me not having known that it was going to be one of the greatest Star Trek episodes ever. When I went back and watched Measure of Man, I was like, this is one of the greatest episodes of Star Trek ever. So, that's a high bar to meet, and it does. But this episode had no expectations. It became one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek ever. So I think for right now, this moment, my answer for what is number 1 is going to be Ad Astra Per Aspera, but really, ask me again tomorrow and it might be Measure of a Man. These two are phenomenal Star Trek episodes, the best of what a Star Trek episode has to offer, the best of what a courtroom drama, inside or outside of Star Trek, could offer, and talk about our glimpses into society and the law and how it relates to people and people's lived experiences. Whew, have I gushed about these 2 episodes enough yet? Let me know what you think of these episodes and all of the other episodes that I discussed down in the comments below. Have you seen Ad Astra Per Aspera yet? If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It is easily deserving of the title of one of the best Star Trek episodes of all time, and certainly the best episode of Star Trek that new Star Trek has produced. And that's coming from a fan of a portion of new Star Trek, not Picard. Sorry, Picard. But I think I've talked long enough. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what your list for these episodes is down in the comments below, and what other kinds of Star Trek ranking lists should I do in the future? Any other tropes that you want me to talk about? Possibly Star Trek time travel episodes, Star Trek crossover episodes, Star Trek episodes where the whole crew gets sick from an alien virus and starts acting weird. It happens a lot. Let me know down in the comments below what you want to see. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good week.